Welcome to Dungeon Academics. My name is Thomas and I will be your instructor. Today I want to discuss the ultimate taboo in tabletop role-playing games, monetisation. In 2022, Cynthia Williams, the then Chief Executive Officer of Wizards of the Coast, said that Dungeons & Dragons is under-monetised. And, in a way, I think she was correct. But I think she said it in entirely the wrong way and took the entire wrong meanings from this realization. What do I mean by this? Well, as someone who is merely a low-level game commentator with aspirations in game design, my ambition is to make roleplay games that I would like to play. And Sven Vink, the head of Larian Studios, said something along those lines this year when he made a speech at one of the gaming awards. He said that Baldur's Gate was successful because the people making the game wanted to make a game that they wanted to play. And that's great. I want to make a game that I want to play. A realization for me that I made a few years ago is that the kind of game that I might want to play isn't necessarily the kind of game that everyone else wants to play. I am a phenomenally nerdy maths and physics teacher. The amount of maths that I am willing to tolerate in a game is much higher than for most other people. I enjoy games where getting out a spreadsheet and planning things and calculating things is an integral component of the game. So the game that I want to make is the game that I would like to play with my friends. I think about the people that I play games with the most. What kind of game would we all enjoy? That's what I'm going for. So I'm not necessarily making a game that I would like by myself playing with clones of me. I'm making a game that I would like to play with the people that I play games with. At some point, game developers go, well, okay, I want to make a game that's going to be as accessible and playable by as wide a market as possible. I want lots of people to play this game. And part of me is going, okay, the game that I want to make to play with my friends, would it be successful in a wider setting? Even if I don't necessarily have ambitions of publishing anything at this point, if I was to publish it, how could I make it accessible and playable for as many people as possible? And that's fine. That's great. The next step along the line, and this is where a lot of people are, is how can I make this game commercially successful in a way that myself, my family don't starve, and the people that are working with me on this game aren't going to starve either. You want to make and sell enough copies of a game to fund the project that makes the game on an ongoing basis and live a relatively comfortable life. And that's fine. A lot of independent game designers, a lot of full-time professional game designers are in this stage. They want to make sure that their game is successful enough, that makes enough revenue that they can continue designing games as a full-time job. And one day in the future, that's my dream is to be in that position as well. I would love that. You take it another step though, and you end up in the situation, how can I make sure my shareholders are happy? What can I do for this game to ensure that my shareholders have a good return on their investment? And at that point, you are no longer designing a game that you want to be played and you want to be successful. You are figuring out how to extract as much revenue as possible from a game. And I think that's the situation that Wizards of the Coast finds themselves in, at least their upper management. The people writing the rules for the game have a love of the game in their heart. They want their game to be successful, they want their game to be popular, they want their game to be played. But as this is a large company with shareholders, there is undoubtedly pressure from management to figure out ways to increase revenue. And when Cynthia Williams said Dungeons and Dragons is under monetized, what she meant is there are ways that we can extract revenue from our gamers that we are not doing. And that was not seen in a popular light because at the time people had not a huge amount of faith that Dungeons and Dragons was going to be monetized in a way that people like. It is absolutely okay to spend money on your hobby. I enjoy that. I think most people that enjoy their hobbies enjoy collecting things associated with their hobby. And looking over my shoulder, I'm just going to angle this down. I have shelves and shelves full of gaming books, gaming magazines, supplements. If I angle up, there's stacks of Warhammer books here. I have spent a lot of money on my hobbies, and as I've got older and my finances have secured, the things that I like spending the money on has changed. When I buy a board game, I like to buy the luxury version. If I can spend money and get metal tokens instead of plastic, then yes, I enjoy the experience of the board game more, and for me, it's worth spending that extra money on. I like it that I'm given the choice. I like it that on Kickstarter, you can go, oh, you know what, I just want the base game, the cheap box that I can play and enjoy. But if I want to, I have the option of buying the neoprene playing mat, the double thickness card player organizers, the metal tokens, or the clay poker chips. I like that. I like being able to spend a little bit of extra money and having the nice version. I went to IKEA and bought a €5 metal shoehorn because it's nicer to use than the plastic one that I have already. That's where I am in my life. And I don't think Dungeons and Dragons is doing that very well. There are people who are prepared to spend thousands of euros on their hobby of Dungeons and Dragons, and very little of that money is going to Wizards of the Coast, the publishers of Dungeons and Dragons. You look at people buying fancy gaming tables, dropping thousands of euros or dollars on these beautiful, customizable wooden gaming tables so that they and their friends can sit in a wonderful environment and play Dungeons and Dragons. None of that money is going to Hasbro. There are hundreds of people making custom dice, beautiful, beautiful dice that are as much works of art as the maths rocks that we love. None of that money is going to Hasbro. There is an entire industry built to support Dungeons and Dragons. And a lot of people make a good living and possibly even quite a bit of profit by making stuff for Dungeons and Dragons that Hasbro sees nothing of because they are not monetizing their player base correctly. What Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast was talking about in these circumstances are subscriptions, microtransactions, moving a player base from sitting around a table to a digital subscription service where they would have the opportunity to spend money on loot boxes and downloadable content. That's not necessarily a future that I want to see for Dungeons and Dragons, and I'll be talking about a possible future for Dungeons and Dragons in another video. Instead, what Wizards of the Coast could be doing is selling products for gamers that improve the gaming experience. I do not want Dungeons and Dragons to be a pay-to-win game, but I wouldn't mind the opportunity to spend a bit of money and have a nicer playing experience. How many people use character sheets which are printed on bog standard 80 grams per square meter A4 paper, or whatever the American equivalent is? Your paper sizes are weird to me. Would a pack of character sheets on thicker paper with a nice texture, would that be a product that could sell and make money? Does Dungeons and Dragons make official dice sets with dice towers? Are there organizers, game journals, things like that that Wizards of the Coast could sell with official Dungeons and Dragons branding? And if they're nice enough, you could use them and play with them in the game. A recurring element in many of my videos is player aids, parts of the game that are physical that interact with the rules of the game. So for example, one idea that I've had is combos in Melee, where by using different weapon mastery features, you can power up your attacks. And having a little mechanical tracker, so maybe it's just a piece of card with some recesses in, and each weapon mastery has a token, and when you use it, you put it in the tracker, and it tells you the bonuses that you get. A little player aid like this. You could do this entirely with a piece of paper and a pencil, and it would have the same effect on gameplay. But the idea of having nice sort of clay poker chips for each weapon mastery, this double thickness card tracker with nice art on it, and a small leather pouch with the tokens in, that's something that would be nice. It would have a nice feel to it, and using it would give this wonderful tactile response. And if someone wanted to use these rules and they weren't prepared to spend any money on the game, they would have the same game mechanic experience. But if they want to spend 20 euros on this upgrade kit, when they're sat around the table, they have something nice and physical to play with. That's 20 euros well spent if it makes you enjoy your hobby more. When I talk about monetizing roleplay games, what I think of is, can I make things that would improve the playing experience, but are not a barrier, but are not a barrier of entry to new players? I do not want people to have to spend a huge amount of money to play a game that I make. I'd love to give them the opportunity to spend a lot of money on it if they want to. And that would improve their gaming experience without making them more powerful in the game. It would make the game nicer rather than easier. So when I write games and game ideas, I like having trackers, I like having tokens, I like having markers that you can physically interact with. Of course, if you're playing on a digital tabletop, none of this applies. But to me, Dungeons and Dragons is still a game that in its ideal form is played around the table, face to face with a group of friends. And anything that you do online should be to try and replicate that experience rather than give a different experience. But that's a topic for another video that I'm probably going to record immediately after this. So, my summary of thoughts. Monetization is not necessarily an evil thing to discuss, but it should not be done in an exploitative way. It should not be done in a way that changes the balance of gameplay. Monetization is a way that allows your players to have a nicer and more luxurious gaming experience without being a barrier of entry for players. If your players can play the game after downloading a free PDF and maybe buying one set of dice, that's fantastic. That makes it about as accessible as it can be. But then giving your players the opportunity to buy additional books with more rules in, buy gaming trackers that will allow them to neatly monitor things in the game. That's a way that you can let your players spend money on their hobby in a way that makes the game better for them. And that's the kind of monetization that I, as a player, like, and as an aspiring game designer, I would want to include in any game that I make. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. What are good examples of monetization? And of course, what are terrible examples of monetization? What do you fear for the future of your favourite roleplay games when it comes to monetization? Anyway, enough talk of money. Enjoy your next game, whatever it may be.